Iowa has nothing over us because we've got black plates.
Dear listeners of Rock Hard Caucus, we are now beginning episode 181, and I know that you are all anticipating a deep dive into Burlington Crank Scott deal, as promised on the previous episode, because I found just an incredible figure named Scott Deal, who's made many appearances in the local Burlington area newspapers over the past decade, and I really, really do want to tell you about it, but something jumped ahead of the Scott Deal rabbit hole. It leapfrogged that on my list of priorities.
What's that, Justin?
Something a little bit more pressing and important happened this week, which is that a longtime friend of the program, Oliver Weilein, announced that he is seeking elected office. He wants to run for a seat on the city of Iowa City, Iowa's City Council. And so Oliver and I talked, and I thought it might be a good idea to record another podcast. I know we just did one of these like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, about music.
It
was great.
And the whole time we were like avoiding the subject of your impending political campaign because we knew it was coming, but we had to keep it quiet.
Making moves in the darkness.
That's right, yeah. But now we are going to take the opportunity to talk about Oliver's resume and his motivations, his ambitions seeking elected office. And I just wanted to begin this just to make it very clear to everybody. This will be not an example of objective journalism in any way. I am 1,000% all in on supporting Oliver's candidacy. I'm gonna forge some documents. I'm gonna I'm gonna illegally claim residence in Iowa City just so I can vote for him. No, that's not true. But I am sad that for the first time ever, I'm disappointed that I live in Coralville so that I can't vote for Oliver. But I do think that this sort of like long form interview format will hopefully be informative to people who maybe are not as supportive at this point of Oliver's candidacy. So to get things started, Oliver, tell me, why do you want to do this?
Well, Justin, it kind of all started with just the sitting city council person, Andrew Dunn, resigning, and that opportunity coming up, and the opportunity for a special election, which is shorter and wouldn't take as many finances. A large reason why I generally am not the biggest supporter of electoral politics is because a lot of times it is just lighting money on fire.
Right. It's it sucks up a lot of time and energy and money that could possibly go to better use.
Go to better uses in the community. And so that being one of the barriers not really being there anymore because it's a short campaign and I would be able to pay for everything myself, honestly, if it came down to it. And then, once I started thinking about that and some neighbors and friends in the district started talking to me about asking me to do it, that's what got me thinking about it. And then I started talking to some people I know, like on city council and city staff, people that I've worked with in like the shelter house program and stuff like that. Because I thought, if I can do something, one extremely important thing, then I will do this. I wanted to make sure before I got into this that it would be an opportunity to have a fighting chance, like feasibility to do extreme good before putting so much time and energy into this. And through talking with a bunch of people, I was convinced that the mood and the atmosphere is there to really tackle homelessness in Iowa City in an empathetic way and in a way that works. And the city is already doing amazing things in that direction, but I would love to come in and expand the programs that they're already doing with the permanent supported housing.
Okay, so housing is like your main focus, like your sort of main motivation for pursuing this.
Mm-hmm. And this particular issue, homelessness, it was kind of like it was the intro for me to where I found out that this would be something with the current makeup of and the atmosphere of city government that it would be actually plausible.
There's
an
appetite to do something.
It really seems so. And so if someone went in there and really spearheaded an effort for this, I thought that, there is a fighting chance to greatly expand permanent supported housing, potentially having more units than there are homeless people in Iowa City.
Do you have like data on that? Do you know how many people are like sleeping outside currently?
Yeah. So I've checked some numbers, and it's been kind of hard to find this data. Some of the data I found was in peak season, which is like in the summer.
Sure. Yeah.
There's, I think, upwards of 200 people in Iowa City that do sleep on the street. And in the winter, it's a lot less, under 40. And, that's because there's big warming centers and stuff like that. So they're technically not sleeping on the street, but they still
don't have
don't have a home. And they're, spending a lot of time outside in the cold in the daytime, or
which is not great either.
Or, just trying to find refuge in public spaces like the library and stuff like that, which it's amazing that, the library's there and some rec centers and stuff are there for that purpose. Iowa City does a lot more than a lot of communities do. So
yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that like people don't get kicked out of the library for things like that. It's always a very peaceful and quiet library all day, every time I'm in there.
And it's been like
nice place to spend some time.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been like, just a thing, for years I've been reading about, specifically like the Y Foundation in Helsinki, Finland, and Hennepin County in Minnesota, the things they've been doing with permanent supported housing. So for those of you who don't know, permanent supported housing is an approach of housing first philosophy, and housing first philosophy is exactly what it sounds like. It's the idea, or it is basically the fact that housing and security in that way needs to come first before people can recover from various things that are making them homeless.
Sure. Yeah. Personal factors,
yes,
are hurdles to them sort of getting a stable home life or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and housing first is really cool. There are some people who are homeless who you do just need to give them a home first and then provide them the resources and getting some income, job searching and stuff like that. But there are other people that they need more supports than that. You can't just give them an apartment, here's a key, and then they're going to
problem solved.
Yeah. Good luck paying $500 or $1,000 a month.
One big problem to solve, but maybe not permanently.
Correct. Yeah. So what permanent supported housing does, and we now have 2 really cool facilities in Iowa City. It's permanent housing, so people they sign leases and they can stay there however long that they want to, and they go through a process of setting up taking a percentage of income that they get and everything like that. And on site, there are counselors, therapists. There's a clinic on site. There's communal areas. There's things that are conducive to readjusting to life while housed, and also getting critical care that you need in order to recover. So providing people housing and these services is so successful in keeping people off the street. The data I've read about, in Helsinki, Finland, with what they call the Y Foundation, it's something like 4 out of 5 people remain housed,
right,
and do not go back out in the street. And then once they do go back out in the street, they can just try again.
Okay.
And in Hennepin County, which is like Minneapolis and St. Paul, like that area,
right,
they're giving numbers like 93% success rate, which is like just crazy good data. And there's so many studies, like paper after paper after paper, study after study comes out and just says like, this works, please do it. And I hate even talking about this, but it has to be talked about.
Yeah.
The fact that doing this saves us so much money as a community. and resources, because the first thing that you should think about that should matter is it is a failure of society that this happens in the first place.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah,
And
we should be thinking about the needs of the
Yes.
human beings that are being failed here, rather than how much it's going to cost us
Exactly,
to,
yeah.
to help them. Yeah.
If for some reason it cost us money to house these people instead of saved us money, I would still be for it.
Right.
But, some people don't think that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people who might be listening, in the data that they came up with in Helsinki was about $16,000 per homeless person per year is saved, which, you take a number like 200 times 15,000, and that's a lot of money. And and not only that, but you are then taking like a percentage of the income once you get them back on your feet, and that's also goes back into the program, so it kind of can pay for itself or go to fund the nonprofits that are running these programs and pay for their staff and services and stuff like that. So
it kind of just requires like an upfront like investment,
correct,
and then starts to kind of just return on itself.
Yeah, and you would think that
Self-sustaining. Yeah,
capitalists love to say that you need to spend money to make money. So you would think that.
But will it infinitely generate profit, Oliver?
No, I mean maybe, but I don't know. It certainly. I think maybe some people have moral qualms with it, or I would call that immoral qualms. But
the moral qualm being that like you're giving somebody something for nothing.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. When I think how people should be looking at it is that could be you.
Right.
That could be you, your family, under the right circumstances, under the worst luck. You have been put in a position where you are not there, and you can't know for sure if you wouldn't end up like that.
Right. Yeah.
And so as a society, it's just bad to see it. It's bad for morale. It's bad for the mental health of the community to see this moral failure physically
right
every day when you're going downtown or when you're driving over on the south side where Shelter House is, and you're driving by some encampments, and there's, even if you don't think it too consciously, what's always in there is that could be me if the worst comes to happen, if I lose my job, if I lose my health care, if I become disabled, if I get a traumatic brain injury, or these types of things.
Whatever safety net is protecting my current way of life, could easily fall apart.
Correct. Yeah.
Within, months.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that eliminating the threat of homelessness is a huge gain for working people in a lot of senses, but also in the sense that I'm going to be specific about here, which is I think that bosses can use that threat against their workers to say, like, hey, you don't get paid that much and your life sucks and you barely scrape by, but you're housed and you have healthcare and you aren't that guy on the street, but you very well easily could be.
Yeah.
So you better not stir the pot too much or rock the boat.
Right. The reason you have what you have now is because you are able to keep your head down and collect this paycheck.
Yeah, so it's moving in that direction of reducing barriers for working people to feel empowered to organize themselves in that way. So yeah, that was one of the main reasons that I got in this race. It's because I think we can do that.
Yeah. How long have they been doing this in Hennepin County?
I'm not entirely sure about Hennepin County. Years, definitely.
And they kind of modeled their thing after the Helsinki model. Is that correct?
I'm sure that they have collaborated.
Yeah.
And all of that. And, those aren't the only two places that do this, but those are the two that I've looked at.
Sure.
Helsinki, they've been doing this since I believe like 2010.
Okay.
And it's all of Finland, but, just most of the population, or a huge chunk of the population, lives in Helsinki.
Right. It's a big urban center. And that's where, people typically end up if they don't have a home.
Correct.
They live in a big city.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so what they did there is they just turned all of their shelters, their emergency shelters, into these facilities and left one emergency shelter open that the beds are never full anymore. And it's basically kind of used as
emergencies don't happen as often.
Correct. Yeah. It's basically kind of used as a place where people go while they are going through the process to be put in permanent supported housing.
Right.
And now there's street outreach teams who would normally just be going around and making sure people don't die outside. Now their street outreach teams go out and just look for homeless people because there's so few and far in between now there that, you know, they have like hotlines that people can call. It's like, hey, I saw like someone sleeping, you know, under this overpass or something like that.
Right.
And then they go there and it's not like, hey, you can't be here. It's, hey, like we can, we can literally help you.
That's so different from like the state of things here where like if you were to call that in, it's just like, you know, you're threatening them with
Correct.
violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, and so people will hear that thing like, oh, a community hotline for homeless people. And instantly you're like, that sounds terrible. Yeah. But if it were under cool conditions,
right.
It would be, and you like trusted this, like these people, these programs to go and actually have the people's best interests in mind, you would love to call that number.
Not just remove them from your site. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a funny thing about Finland is that this program was kind of spearheaded by a center-right politician who, you know, just knew that it was the right thing to do, but also that it was financially better and just better for Finland in general.
Yeah.
Now Finland is, I think, literally one of only a handful of places in Europe where homelessness is going down, like substantially. Same thing with Hennepin County. Homelessness is going down in Hennepin County, and I believe Milwaukee too, who they might be doing some stuff like this. But, you know, last year...
And I mean, I think nationwide it has increased in general, right? Over
18%.
The past like 5 years.
Over the past 1 year, it's just increased 18%.
Okay.
Which is crazy.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
That we're just sort of not solving. And I think that also adds to that what you were talking about, the morale of a community, where there's not only that implicit threat that like you could end up there if you don't like stay in line. There's also just the constant reminder that like huge problems don't get solved.
Yes.
Like we don't take care of anything.
I mean, people are afraid to, for some reason. They're afraid of, I mean, specifically because to run for office, you kind of got to be a little bit of a narcissist.
Sure. How much of a narcissist would you say you are?
There has to be some in
percentage,
me.
I don't
there
know.
has to be some in me to do this. I don't know how much. And you have to be a little bit of a, I don't know, usually they're well connected and they have the resources and the ability to, and the time to do these things.
Right. Yeah.
I just think and so they have a lot of, I don't know, like conflict of interest about these things.
Of course. Yeah.
And, or just have not been exposed to actual solutions. They are just surrounded by people who have these kind of like technocratic trickle down solutions to a lot of these things and like neoliberal ideas about how to tackle these things. And, you know, not even necessarily out of malice, but just out of, you know, ignorance, which is fine. You don't know, you've never heard of these things and you didn't think that was an option. You haven't seen the data, but definitely the ruling class has a implicit stake in this because they don't want workers getting any crazy ideas. They would rather there be homeless people to have that contrast.
Yeah, you need to keep like a permanent underclass to
Correct.
As a cudgel.
Not too much. They need workers who can work and produce them money, but they want some of them there just, you know, as a little bit of a fear inducing thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you've kind of already answered this question, but so we have these case studies and we have the data that proves that like this idea does what it intends to do. It keeps people off the street. It like puts them back in a home and helps them, you know, get their life on track again. And we have the numbers that show that it actually saves us money overall, right? So why doesn't this happen everywhere? You gave a couple examples, just plain ignorance, conflicts of interest where like you have an interest in maybe a different conflicting program instead, or you want things to be like this. So I guess if we look at the city that we're talking about now, Iowa City, why isn't it happening here already?
Well, the cool thing is it is. Like we have 501, which has I don't remember exactly how many units both of these places have. We have Cross Park Place and 501, and I believe we have around 50 units total. So this has already made a huge difference for a lot of people. And I think maybe my complaint with the city is not being as, maybe they've tried, but not informing the public that they're doing these things.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know a lot about this. Yeah.
And there's like great videos online that Shelter House has put out, like, testimonials from people that live there that are saying, this literally saved my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, this is absolutely essential to me. Like, this saved me. I think if more people were able to see things like that, then they would get on board and then like be like, yes, we want this. And they start to see the effects of it working.
Right.
I also think, like I said, honestly, with like the current makeup of council, I don't think it's any like weird malice. I think it's just, I don't know, just a little bit of ignorance. Like, just like never heard of these concepts, never heard of these plans. They're surrounded by people who believe a certain thing, and they're like, okay, you're an expert, so I'm going to listen to you,
Sure,
because
yeah,
people aren't supposed to know everything, and you just need to do your own research, listen to different people, and think critically about it, and then come to the conclusion.
Right. I do wonder. So, an option for housing that is not tied to like market conditions. Do you think that may possibly impact, rent prices in the city?
So, I'm a huge advocate for public housing, and in the United States, public housing has a really bad rap.
Yeah.
Because of like the 60s and 70s.
The projects.
Yeah. And there are just so many fatal flaws that were instilled into these projects from the beginning, and they were sabotaged by austerity and mismanagement. So it's really a shame that it has the stigma of, well, publicly owned public housing does not work because it somehow they think it intrinsically turns people into, it makes them addicted to drugs, and
like the
they
people
get filled
who...
with MS-13 and just that type of nonsense and fear mongering. When if you just read about public housing and the history of public housing, even in the United States, but also just around the world, like there are so many places where public housing is essential and it works, and you can learn from those places and learn from the mistakes of the past and use this as a real opportunity to make affordable housing actually a thing and not just something we always talk about.
Yeah.
A way to actually do that without trying to incentivize developers and give them more and more and more money to please make affordable units that a lot of times aren't that affordable, and they sometimes can just go away after 10 or 15 years.
The units that are incentivized to build, yeah.
And also, affordable versus luxury housing, the only thing that makes them different is the price. Like, there's no other, like, luxury needs to have a hot tub or something. No, it's literally just the price. So
there aren't like qualifications. Luxury housing is not like an actual sort of like defined thing necessarily.
It's literally I think it's just
you spend more money on this.
You just spend more money on it. Yeah. So there's a lot of things in Iowa City that we can do that isn't just trying to beg developers and landlords to please make us more affordable housing. And that comes with things like inclusive zoning, which basically just means that you incentivize a developer who, say, is building a 10-unit like apartment building or something, and you say, okay, we will give you these types of tax incentives or this, that, and the other thing if 10% of those units are affordable, quote unquote affordable. Which,
how strictly defined is that?
Affordable?
Yeah, in those sort of agreements, do you know?
I'm
sure I've read this before.
Yeah,
but,
I don't really know specifically in Iowa City. I know that a lot of affordable housing units I've seen were like, a 2-bedroom for $1,600.
Okay.
Which does not seem affordable to me.
Right.
Which seems like above market to me. I don't know. I lucked out with where I live, so, and I split a 1-bedroom apartment with my partner, so we're good. But a lot of people don't want to live like that.
Right.
But it is a way to force rents down public housing is, without just doing trickle down economics, basically, which is giving rich people more and more money, and then the affordable housing will trickle down onto us and it'll fix all of our problems.
Yeah, because if you give them money, they'll do what you ask.
Yeah,
they'll be nice. They'll be nicer.
They'll be very nice. And I've been told that when negotiating inclusive zoning, like that's the first thing that is always like, we need to make sure we protect their profit margins. And
so you're not as concerned with that.
I'm not as concerned with protecting their profit margins. No. I don't even think we need to work. I mean, inclusive zoning is better than nothing. But we need to do way better than nothing. And I just think there's lots of other things we can do that will not come out of taxpayer hands and will have the desired effect of lowering rent.
Yeah.
In Iowa City. And one of them could be public housing, where you just flood the market with city-run public housing for very mixed incomes. Not just for poor people, not just for people who are below a certain AMI, but very diversified as to not ghettoize people.
Right. That's part of the failure of like previous attempts at public housing in this country.
Correct.
Right? Is that they like basically just funneled a bunch of poor people into them.
Correct. Yeah. They funneled a bunch of people who already were under extremely bad circumstances, and they tried to force like weird, like moral constraints on them. And, yeah. So it's, there's so many lessons that we can learn from the past there, and to make it not happen like that. There's so much data about what types of buildings work. Because another thing that was wrong with the projects back in the 60s and 70s was a lot of them were just too big.
Just huge, dense towers.
And they were unable to effectively maintain it because the bigger the building, the costlier the maintenance on it, because you need like your own water pumps and all of these like more wiring and electricity and all of these things. And
there's a lot of people using all those things at once. Yeah.
And so if people start moving out of it, then the money you're getting from it doesn't even cost the maintenance. And then that causes the dilapidation to happen to these buildings and makes things even worse. So, there's even data about like what type of buildings work and how to mix different incomes, to make them work. And, also public housing is a thing that would not only force rents down by making landlords and developers compete with you.
Yeah, changing the supply.
Housing, yeah. But it also gives the city revenue because you are paying the city your rent, basically. And so the money that you make, so you go to work and you make all this wealth, you produce all this wealth, and your boss takes a bunch of it, right?
Right.
And then he gives you a wage, and then you come home, and then your landlord takes more of that wealth. And it just goes into the pockets of two people.
Right.
Whereas, this kind of cuts that supply off a little bit to where the wealth we produce as like workers in Iowa City can go back into the community to do things we want to do, like more beautification, more public parks, more public facilities, fixing our roads, fixing our pipes and waterways and stuff like that. And if the housing market isn't terrible and public housing is around to keep things level, then you won't have to worry about these beautification or making your neighborhood better. You won't have to worry about that pricing you out and gentrifying you.
Right.
Because a huge complaint or a huge reason people are scared of their neighborhoods, quote unquote, improving, is that they're like, oh, rent's going up.
Right, exactly. And then, if this becomes a more desirable place to live, then I will no longer be able to afford those desires.
And imagine if people were like, wow, they're improving my neighborhood? Cool. Now my neighborhood's better. Not, God, I'm going to pay double rent in a couple of years.
Right, exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of your ideas are sort of emphasizing a more like collective approach to living in this city.
Correct.
As opposed to the way things are now, where my impression of things is that there's like a cabal of landlords and business owners who kind of dictate the terms of just about everything that we encounter in this city. Could I bring up one of the other people running in this race?
If you want, yeah.
Just to sort of illustrate a contrast. To be specific, when you were talking about not focusing so much on like incentivizing developers and like making them sort of like the first priority in these attempts at changing the housing market, Ross Nusser is a declared candidate in this race as well. I've been keeping an eye on the county website to see who else files. I know there's a third person that you just told me about that I missed, but it seems like you and Ross Nusser are kind of like the two candidates people are talking about in this race. And he is a real estate developer, right?
Yes.
I don't know much about him as an individual, but that is how he makes his money, is that he is a real estate developer.
And an agent.
And a real estate agent. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know he has some responsibility for the building that houses the Webster a couple blocks from here.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like he will probably have ideas that are more in line with the current status quo.
Probably. And like I said, it's not like I think this person is like a horrible person, or intrinsically ontologically evil. That's not what I'm saying. It's clearly he's just been in this world, and I think he probably is actually like passionate about affordable housing in Iowa City and wanting to make it work. We just disagree on how to do it,
Sure, yeah.
Because I don't know the guy. I'm not going to make any moral judgments on him.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
For sure. So, he's just been surrounded by this type of, these types of solutions and these ideas, which is, things like inclusive zoning and things like, incentivizing people with capital and with wealth.
Yeah.
To come in and help the community in that way by having people who already have resources come and do a thing for you for something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the main contrast between us.
Yeah. It seems like you're more optimistic that alternatives are possible.
Correct. I'm very optimistic. It's things that, lots of ideas that have been done in other places that work. And even before public housing, there's lots of things that we can do to get rents down. Obviously, the first thing I would want to do would be rent control, but that is illegal in the state of Iowa to do that. We are one of 32 states that has anti-rent control laws on the books, which is crazy.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Why is rent control outlawed in so many places?
I think it's because landlords and developers and real estate conglomerates have extreme hold on the political infrastructure of the United States. And they want to protect their profits, so they lobby and they donate money through super PACs to people so that they can maintain high rents and make as much money as possible for them and their shareholders, because that is the goal. If you are a capitalist, that you have to maximize immediate gains to make your shareholders happy, to protect your company and protect your job as like a CEO. Because if your shareholders are mad at you, that's bad for you.
Right.
So it's just built in to the system that these things are on the books.
Yeah, it seems bad that every aspect of our lives is tied up in that same sort of like mentality and that same system of priorities where profit generation trumps all.
Correct.
Collective human need, that is not nearly as important as this group of people making money this year.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, like other things, like I was going to say, besides public housing, that isn't even rent control, is higher fees on vacant properties. Because a lot of times landlords will have super high rent and they'll just be like, all right, we're going to wait until someone agrees to pay this high rent.
Right.
And so they'll leave a residential place vacant for a long time. But you can crank up, you can't make it a tax per se. So that you'd have to work around it because you can't like create a new tax as a city. You have to wait for the state to do something, and they're not going to do that. So you'd have to work around it and make it some clever way to have a fee for vacancies, which incentivizes landlords to lower their rents so they don't have to pay these fees. You need to make it less profitable for them to have places vacant.
Yeah, which is, it's absurd. I mean, doesn't that seem like it should already be not profitable for you to have a property that's just sitting vacant.
Yeah.
Nobody's paying you to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, they are losing money because they still need to pay the property taxes and stuff like that. But
Right.
it is clearly not enough of a loss for them to care that much.
Yeah, I mean, they must cover it just by the sheer like mass of their portfolio, like how much stuff they own. They can cover the loss that they're losing here by holding this spot vacant with all these other units where people are paying them rent. Yeah, it's just there. I don't know, this basic concept of like supply versus demand. It can be bypassed if you own enough. If you have like acquired enough wealth for yourself, you start to like, you can artificially change the economy to your own benefit.
Yeah, it's wild. It's super wild.
I just feel like we need to recognize that we have these like collective levers we can pull to kind of like, if we're going to remain in this capitalist system, like we need to at least like use the tools available to us to kind of like even the playing field a little more.
And, to talk about specific landlords that people are mad at in town in Iowa City, there's a certain landlord that a lot of people are mad at in downtown Iowa City. And, people like a lot of these things that I'm talking about can be used. A lot of these solutions can be used to help commercial real estate too, because it is profitable, or it is not unfeasible right now for big landlords downtown Iowa City to let places just sit there empty.
I'm thinking of a specific example right now.
Yeah.
Big open vacant building that's been empty for like 2 years or longer. I don't know. Yeah.
And I mean, if you have a vacancy and you are losing too much money on it, it incentivizes you to lower your rent. So people will buy, or people will rent out your facility. Another really cool thing that I would love to do in Iowa City, and I would love to look into, is what's called a right of first refusal law.
Sure.
Which, for those of you who don't know what that means, it's, I'll just, in a residential sense.
Yeah.
So if you and your family own a single family home, or you rent it.
You rent it. Yeah.
And your landlord decides, I want to sell this house. Instead of a big landlord who already has the cash to throw down,
Blackwater.
Exactly. They would first have to ask you, the renters, hey, I'm selling this. You get first dibs on negotiating with me to buy this place.
Yeah.
So not only would that work in helping people turn into homeowners, it would work to stop the pattern of local businesses being run out. Because I know multiple businesses downtown have said they have tried to buy their place, but they get undercut by large corporations that have the ability to just put all that money up front.
Yeah, that happened. I mean, that happened like over where I live, the Iowa River Power restaurant. They could have easily like purchased that building and kept the business running, but the guy who owns it, he's not interested in that.
Yep. And I mean, for him, it's just like, I'll make more easy money the other way.
Right.
So this would force them to come to the table with tenants. It would also work with apartment buildings. The tenants would have the opportunity to form a tenants organization and then have like a cooperative housing situation going on there, which would be awesome and also helps lower rents around. And then also it could go so far as to, if an owner of a business, wants to sell the business itself, then you could have something, a right of first refusal laws for the employees would then have the first dibs on buying it from the owner and starting a workers cooperative.
Yeah.
Which I'm all about.
Yeah. There's like a few examples of that happening like in Iowa over the past few years. Like a coffee shop in Ames, I think, did that.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it worked out. I think they're still going, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of opened this up to the community a little bit. Like I posted on social media that I didn't say it was you, but I think people guessed that I was interviewing you. I said I might be interviewing a candidate for your city council later this week.
Word.
And okay, well, this is someone who doesn't live here, but he's got a stake in like what happens in the state. Ryan Melton, who ran for Congress in Iowa's 4th district, the past 2 cycles, maybe 3.
Okay.
And this is related to something we were just talking about. He asks, what progress can you make for Iowa City in the face of obstacles present at the county, state, and federal level that will impede such aims. For example, our state has outlawed rent control for local municipalities.
This is a real question because the state hates it when Iowa City does things.
Yeah.
And
plenty of examples.
Like we tried to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
I think we did try to do rent control.
There was an attempt at rent control at some point.
So it's a real possibility that we could do something and then the state will come in and try to interfere. But I don't think we need to, I think we shouldn't be pre-compliant to the people who do not have the best interests of people in mind in the state and federal government. I think that if we want to do something for the people in Iowa City, we need to do it. And if the state wants to use their time, money, and resources to prevent us from doing something for our community, it is up to us as the city to fight for that in court if need be. Spend resources fighting in court for these things. I don't
know that there's ever been like a legal fight.
Yeah.
When these things happen, it's just like the state shuts it down, and we're like, well, we tried.
We tried. And it's
it sucks because that's going to be like costly for everyone, but it does seem necessary.
I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
I think not just throwing up our hands and being like, well, we can't really do anything, guys, because the state might do something. It is costly for them, and we need to make it costly if they are going to do these things. And if we need to take it to the Iowa Supreme Court, we could. Federal Supreme Court, we could. And I know those are two not friendly places, but...
Could we take it to, like, the International Criminal Court?
No, we just sanctioned them, actually.
All right. Yeah. We don't recognize their authority. Right?
Yeah. But even if the cards are stacked against you, it's just throwing up your hands and just saying, we can't do anything to help these people. I think there are always ways legally. There's always loopholes. There's always little things that you can do.
Yeah.
And there are very, very smart and compassionate people who work in the law that we can collaborate with to be as sneaky as possible, to be as creative and smart as possible about this. And I really think that if you have people in office that are just willing to put in the work to do that, then we can be successful.
Yeah. Another question that is not so related to housing, because that's been our main focus for most of this interview. Matthew on Twitter asked, how are you as a council member going to try and reduce, and I don't know if this is a goal of yours, but how are you going to reduce the number of personal vehicles downtown?
It's funny that this question comes up because I'm actually reading a book right now called Happy City by Charles Montgomery. It is an amazing book, by the way. It goes into basically just the science of how cities affect the mental health and the actual like happiness level of people. And one of the main things that they talk about in that book is how car infrastructure makes us unhappy as people. And I know that's probably a lot of people see that and it's like, well, I like my car. I like the convenience and everything. But then they're like, well, parking sucks and and it's expensive and all these things. It
got a lot more expensive in Iowa City this year too.
Definitely, yeah. And it's something like long term we as a society need to do is to get away from car infrastructure as much as possible. Not only is it way better for the environment, it is better for us. I recommend everybody read the book Happy City by Charles Montgomery, and it goes into so many of the details about why us being spread apart and needing vehicles to go see each other, to go to work, to go downtown, and then to park, and then to go up 4 sets of escalators, and about how that is detrimental to our mental health. But specifically in Iowa City, it's like, I think there's a lot of good happening. Like the Ped Mall is awesome. I would love to see the Ped Mall expanded. Yeah. But I would have to like talk with some of the business owners down there to see how they would feel about that. Because I don't want to drive out any more like local businesses or something like that.
Sure.
But that's something that I'd be willing to work towards just because I love the Ped Mall. It's like probably one of the happiest places in Iowa City, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think the businesses there do good.
I think so. Most of them have been there a while.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I think so.
There's not a whole lot of turnover.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that big vacant building we were talking about is kind of on the Ped Mall.
Kind of on the Ped Mall, yeah. But yeah, no, that's definitely something that I'm extremely interested in, is ways in which to not only be better for the environment, but doing so in ways that make us just objectively happier and more connected to each other by not being so separated. A very interesting fact from that book, or interesting data point, was if you have what's called a super commute to work, which is like, I believe it was over an hour each way, or an hour and a half, you have a 40% chance higher risk of getting divorced.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
And that was crazy to me. And like, no matter how cool and big your house is, like no matter how big your yard is, no matter what kind of car you have, if you have to commute that far, each day is a new nightmare of going to work and being in traffic and hating your life that way.
Yeah, it just eats up time you could be spending with your spouse
and family. Yeah. And whereas in the home, like you get this big house and like the serotonin hits really hard for the first year or so, and then you're like, well, it's the same house every day. But every day I get up and I have to drive 3 hours to and from work. And anyways,
yeah, totally,
lots of cool stuff.
Yeah. And I think that the fare-free transit that's been going on with city buses has been a positive move in that direction. And
everybody that I've talked to about it is just like, yes, this is amazing, especially people like lower income people and homeless people. It is like critical for them, this free transit. It's so good for them. And doing things like that, expanding, working with like bus drivers who have really good ideas when I've talked to some of them about how we can improve.
Some of the smartest people in the world.
Yeah, straight up. My dad is a bus driver.
Oh, really? I didn't know
a school bus driver.
Yeah.
You know, they have really good ideas about routes, and, you know, they're like, these routes do not seem effective. I think if we do this, then we can get more riders and get more people, you know. So working with bus drivers on that, expanding routes, making them more frequent.
Yeah. Do they still not run on Sundays?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah. That was a big problem for me. For a while, I was taking the bus from Coralville into Iowa City. It does not really work with my schedule anymore. Part of that being not frequent enough. Well, part of it also being I have a job in Cedar Rapids as well, which adds to the necessity of a personal vehicle, unfortunately. But yeah, I would love to see like some of the other, like the Coralville bus system. Maybe they could go fare free also, if there was some sort of partnership with Iowa City, maybe to help with that.
I'm also a huge proponent of bringing those scooters into town. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Please don't quote me on that.
Yes, that was a joke, everyone.
Yes.
We don't want the like.
You're going to make me download an app to ride a scooter? Are you kidding me?
Download an app. All the money goes to these like venture capitalist firms.
Yep. One cool thing that I know, like when I was in Utrecht, Netherlands, the amount of bikes being ridden in that city, it like scared me. Like I like went to a street and there was like thousands of people on bikes just like riding down the street. And they also have like a free bike system where they have stations where you can like check out bikes for free, and then you just ride them and you can drop them off at a station. There's lots of different ways that different cities use them, but I think that's a really good program too.
Yeah, what a fantasy world.
Yeah.
It's so beyond like what even seems feasible here.
I mean, there are places in the United States that have systems like this, but usually like a city run like bike system where you can like rent a bike, but it's like you usually have to pay for it.
Yeah. Like New York has those, right? And they were saying that assassin like took one of those bikes.
Yeah.
I think that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
he had his own bike, I think.
You know, those are, you know, like you said, just fantasy world stuff where it's like the things that could be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. If we just shifted our priorities a little bit towards like, I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty basic to me. Like just, don't you want to like feel good?
Yeah.
and have everybody else like sort of be happy to be alive?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Wouldn't that be awesome?
Instead of everything being oriented towards profit generation for a small group of people.
You know, and can I talk about car infrastructure some more?
Yeah, totally.
Another cool thing that I've read about is, you know, back in the 90s, the city of Bogota, Colombia, a new mayor came into town, and there was on the table, there was this huge prospect of building this freeway system through the city. And he was like, how about no? And he spent the millions of dollars that would go into that and built like thousands of miles of bike trails and green spaces. And he did this thing where, I can't remember his name right now. He did this thing where he was like, okay, we're going to try this one day. No one drives a car unless you absolutely have to for one day. And it was so popular. People were like skeptical at first, I think, but after it was so popular, and like the visible effects from like the smog being thinner, and people just out and about, just walking and skating and biking around. It became a national holiday where once a year they're just like, yep, it's no car day, and it's like super popular. So there's a huge correlation between car infrastructure and making us happy or unhappy.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, whenever I'm in a car, like during the day in Iowa City, I'm not happy.
Correct.
No chance. It is not pleasant to drive in downtown Iowa City if there's any sort of traffic. What else do I got? Let me hang on. I got Instagram messages I got to check too. People asking you important questions. Shit. Ross Klauser, former resident of Iowa City, asks, Oliver, are you straight edge?
Yes. For those who don't know what that means, that just means I don't drink or do drugs in the punk rock way.
But it's cool that I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit more on sort of what our state legislature is doing. Emma Denny, a mutual friend of ours, asks, how will you deal with current and future anti-trans laws handed down from the legislature? And I know that this is an important issue too.
Yeah, definitely. I have so many transgender friends. It's like, I'm like the token cis gendered person of the friend group. I'm sure you feel like that too sometimes. Justin.
Sometimes, yeah. You rank higher than me, I think. But we're in a similar boat.
So many of my friends who I would do literally anything for are trans, and it just, the past election cycle and just the current climate, it just like sickens me every day. Like the amount of vitriol and hate against these people for no reason, for political gain.
Yeah.
It's just like ultimate scumbag behavior from these people. And I don't have enough contempt or disgust for them. Obviously, that's on the state level too. There are things like bathroom bills and preventing trans people from playing school sports and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's been the case for a couple years now that they do not allow trans girls in school sports. I think even at the college level, I forget exactly where all that went, but there's that. There's like preventing access to medical care, of course, too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It makes me mad. I'll leave it at that. But there are things, I think, as a city that we can do. And it also ties into what I was saying, is like, we can't just sit back and let these people be further victimized by the state and federal government. Even if we think something might be challenged in court or might be challenged federally or by the state, we need to try, because these are our most vulnerable people who live in our community, and we need to do something, and not be afraid to fight for them. And there are different, like, I've talked with a lot of people about this thing. What could the city in particular do? And one of the things is, as city council, we kind of have the authority to tell our city attorney, and I believe this is the case, how he interprets law.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know that the Iowa ACLU and One Iowa like this approach of having your city and county governments interpret like the 14th Amendment in a certain way, which then effectively makes things not enforced or deprioritized.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas you can't legally, specifically, quote unquote, tell your local law enforcement to not enforce something.
Yeah, I think that's specifically forbidden in state law now.
Yeah, and I believe that was like Back the Blue law stuff.
Yeah.
But
obviously, you only have so much resources to enforce the law, and so you've got to there's got to be a list, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
What's most important?
And I'm really, that's one thing that seems like a really good idea. So I'm really excited to talk to these, to talk to folks who are really smart, know the law better than me, and have this experience and have really good ideas, and to listen to these people and to do literally whatever is necessary.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the Adam Zabner post?
If you would like.
Would you be all right talking about that?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to point this out because it seems like there is a wing of, we've talked about how the way that Republicans are running this state is abysmal and victimizing people for their own political gain, and it's horrible, right? And the opposition party, the Iowa Democrats, we can find fault with them as well, I'm sure. Are you a Democrat?
No.
Okay. Have you ever been even registered as a Democratic voter?
I think I was literally just a caucus for Bernie in 2016.
Okay, cool. So with that context in mind, I would just like to read for the record a Facebook post by State Representative Adam Zabner. And I believe you are his constituent, right? You live in his district, House District 90?
Yes, I believe so.
Adam Zabner. He caught wind that Oliver was running for city council and dug up a couple of tweets of Oliver's and said, "If you don't love our country, you cannot be an effective public servant." This person is running for city council and has been endorsed by supervisors John Green and Mandy Remington and city councilor Laura Burgess. It's absolutely disgusting. I wonder if John and Mandy think, and this is a quote from one of your tweets, the American flag should be used as toilet paper. The deranged politics this represents should have absolutely no place in the Democratic Party. So again, you are not personally a Democrat.
Nope.
I guess those three people he listed who have endorsed you are part of the Democratic Party. So I guess maybe he's addressing them with that.
That's the more likely interpretation.
So first off, he's claiming that because you tweeted that this was in response to a Daily Iowan opinion piece that says the modern perception of the American flag needs to change. It was sort of some standard pro flag nationalist type stuff. And that's where you said that the American flag should be used as toilet paper as kind of a retort to that. And then a video of a flag burning that you posted on July 5th where you said happy 4th. Okay. So these two tweets are taken as I guess evidence that you don't love our country. And if you don't love our country, you cannot be an effective public servant. So I guess we'll just ask it this way. Do you love the United States of America?
I do not love the state of the United States of America. No. Its place in the world, its history as a state. And I don't shy away from that. And I think a lot of people have trouble, especially in a place where from cradle to grave, you are just given so much jingoistic, nationalistic talking points and propaganda, to where you see someone not holding that same idolatry, you hold these things in such high regard. And if someone doesn't see it like that, you see that as a personal attack on the people that live here.
Right.
Where it is literally the opposite, and they don't understand someone like me whose allegiance is not to a nation state or a political party, but to us as human beings, to basic dignity for all people, to the land that we live on, to the ecosystem, to the animals. That is where my allegiance is to. And the things I've seen in my life, the things I've read about in my life, the people I've talked to in my life who have just been victimized over and over and over and over again from the systems of power and oppression in the United States and caused by the United States. I've been to the Middle East. I've been to Central America, hearing people talk about the effect that the United States foreign policy over the last 150 years has had on so much of the world. You spin a globe, close your eyes, point your finger, and there has been something there probably that the United States has meddled in.
Yeah.
And I've seen too many, it could even be boiled down to this. I've seen too many indigenous people be shot with rubber bullets and tear gassed in my life to ever look at the American flag and feel some sort of like love and pride for what that stands for to me. I love the people of Iowa City more than anything, and the people who live here and make up the country, the United States of America. But in regards to its government, to its state, to its place in the world, I do not love it. And I think it is our responsibility to create something from the ground up that we are proud of and we do love. And I think that narrative and that viewpoint, I don't think these people have encountered that very much, so they don't understand it. It's not something done out of hate. It's something done out of love for humanity as a whole.
Yeah, and it's not even just foreign policy. Like you said, rubber bullets fired at indigenous people. Mm-hmm. They were here first. But also, I mean, even the European settlers that our country's government, is built by or whatever, and and intended to represent. Even if you love those people, the United States government is more an enemy to its own people than it is, a benefit, a protector of. Mm-hmm. They have only made things worse for almost all of us. Mm-hmm. And so I feel exactly the opposite of Adam. I think that you cannot be an effective public servant. You cannot effectively serve the public if you have this like undying, unquestioned loyalty to like the United States federal government. I think that is ignorant, and I don't think he earnestly believes it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, you can't, can't view people's intentions. But, I'll just say, I said what I said. And posting dumb, funny stuff on Twitter is, if that's disqualifying for me, then I don't know what to tell you.
I think it's funny to think that might be disqualifying in the year 2025. Mm-hmm. After all we've been through.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I would call deranged politics that are so normalized in this country. I think letting homeless people sleep on the street is deranged politics.
Yeah.
I think sending billions of dollars to a state that is committing genocide, deranged politics.
Yeah.
I think not providing health care to everybody in this country is deranged politics. I don't think Twitter posting is deranged politics. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to leave it if you feel good about it. Everybody should check out Oliver4iowacity.com, which has a lot of Oliver's priorities and background and everything in text. If you weren't fully satisfied by this audio discussion, and I think we should close out with some local music because we both love Iowa City. I was thinking something from the new This World Is Not Kind tape would be a good way to go out. Mm-hmm. And probably just the opening track. Just a little bit of that. We'll hear some of that. Check that out at, what is their website? twinkscreamo.bandcamp.com, I think was their page. And I'll correct that if I got it wrong later. But thank you, Oliver, for having that conversation with me. Thank you, listeners, for listening to it. And everybody who supports the show, I appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thank you.